show you each book, give you a short summary on what it's about. And yeah, if you have more questions about any of these books, feel free to ask. And I also have a task for you. I'm gonna start with the requests that I could not fulfill or couldn't find any books for, and I'm gonna ask you if you have any book recommendations that would fit this specific request, to please leave them down below so that the people who asked that request can also have something new to read. So without further ado, let's start with the unfulfilled requests. The first was, I am looking for a book with a similar vibe to the game Dear Esther, so like something dark, lonely and kind of philosophical. I never played Dear Esther, but I read the Wikipedia entry and it said something about letters, so my only kind of recommendation is This Is How You Lose the Time War, because it's told through letters and it also has that feeling of loneliness in a way, but I don't think it's very similar to the game. Sorry. The next request was poetry about queerness, disability, loss, nature, humanity. I'm not a huge poetry person, unfortunately, but I've recently read The Senator Flowers by Ruby Carr, and I thought this was very good. It's about heartbreak, it's also about finding roots, and the author is the daughter of immigrants. I don't know where she's from, and she writes a lot about belonging, also self-acceptance. Then it's also about grief, honoring one's roots and empowerment. And then on my TBR, but I have not read it, are two books, Disability, Visibility and Disability Intimacy. It's not poetry, it's a collection of essays, but maybe that could be something you're looking for. Queerness, I have two recommendations. One called The Black Flamingo, which is a coming-of-age story told in verse. I haven't read it, but I've been told that it's good. And the other is We Have Always Been Here, a queer Muslim memoir. But if you have any more recommendations about poetry, about queerness, disability, loss, nature and humanity, please comment them down below. The next request was, I just finished reading The Song of Achilles. I'm looking for any sort of Greek mythology books, can be any genre. And The Song of Achilles is actually the only Greek mythology book I have read. But I've been told that Piranesi is quite good. Or maybe Circe, very unpredictable ending? I don't know, but I did not predict the ending. And it's not really a mystery, but maybe this. Everyone in my family has killed somebody or someone, by Benjamin Stevenson. It's about a guy whose family consists of people who have killed someone. Not all were intentional, some were accidents or self-defense. Many ways to end life. And they have a family reunion that starts with a dead person. It's very humorous, and the ending, for me, was very unpredictable. And it's also a recommendation for the next request. I've been trying to find good murder mystery novels that have humor mixed in lately, but haven't had much luck. Any recommendations? Everyone in my family has killed someone. I rated this 5 stars. It has a very specific writing style, but I thought it was very funny. Then I also have Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman, in a similar vein as the last one, or humor-wise. And this is about 4 people living in an old people's home, but like a fancy one for rich people, who are teaming up to solve a murder. Very funny, but I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it has a slow start. And then on my TBR, but I haven't read it yet, is How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin, about a woman who predicted her own death years ago, and now a younger relative of hers, I think, is trying to solve the murder that actually happened. I haven't read it yet, but I heard that it's humorous. Okay. Favorite mystery or crime novels? And there's also a second part, we'll get to that later. So, years ago, I was obsessed with the crime novels by Ethan Cross. This is Ethan Cross, I Am the Night. I don't know if they're actually available in English. This is a series of very dark murder mystery about a serial killer and a policeman, and in this first part they work against each other, and in the second, third, fourth, I think there are 6 parts, they work together kind of. Anything more would be a spoiler, but if you're interested in dark murder mystery, maybe consider this. It's kind of, the details are kind of gruesome at points, but I really liked the books when I was younger. I was like 16. And then also a classic, The Secret History by Donna Tartt, about a small group of pretentious Greek students who do something they're not supposed to do. So it starts with the reader finding out that one of them is dead, and then the whole book is spent on piecing together the events of all that happened for the reader. The characters know, but the reader doesn't. Absolutely recommend this. Yes. And then the second part of this request, why is that such a difficult word, was any super nostalgic books or series that you like to reread. There's a lot. I was kind of a pseudo horse girl as a child. I never spent any time with actual horses, but I read a lot of horse books, and some of them I kept, and I like to reread them every now and then. But from the UK, I don't know, but way more popular in Germany. You might not know this, but this is by Enid Blyton, and it's her St. Clair's series about twins going to school, twin girls. I don't know what they're called in English. I think one of them is called Isabel, and I don't know the other's name. But in Germany they're called Hanni und Nanni, which is short for Hannah, so Hannah, and Marianne, I guess, so Hanni und Nanni. They are super popular in Germany with little girls, so much so that there are a lot more stories in Germany. I read on the Wikipedia page that there is actually more books in German than there is in English, or than there are in English, because it was so popular here. You can see this book is very old. Got this from my mom, I think. And sometimes I like to reread them just for the school drama. Yeah, it's about girls going to school, boarding school. Okay, and then another request for the mystery, leading over to fantasy, which will be our next section. I'm looking for a mystery or fantasy with some good plot twists that keep escalating the threat or mystery. I would love to audibly gasp while reading. While neither of these books were 5 stars, I did audibly gasp during Caravel by Stephanie Garber, 3 out of 5 stars. It's about 2 sisters who want to participate in a magical game, and one of them is kidnapped and is set as the prize for the game, so the other sister has to compete in the game to save her sister. Absolutely full of plot twists, full of audibly gasping, a little bit confusing, but very captivating. And then the other, I only rated 2 out of 5 stars. It was not a very good book, but it's full of plot twists. Cruel Illusions by Margie Foston. This is a very lewd edition, isn't it so gorgeous? This is about a girl whose mother fell victim to a vampire, who, in her pursuit of revenge, enters a magical circus and magical games, and it sounds so good, but the execution wasn't as good, but plot twist. Now, before we get to fantasy, some more random book requests. I'm currently in a reading slump. What would you recommend to get out of it? Love, Kiri. Love back to you, Kiri. So, I have one general rule of thumb for when I'm in a reading slump. When I'm in a reading slump, I like to read something that I know is trashy, something that I know is not gonna be good. So I have low expectations, and I can make fun of the book while reading it. This doesn't work for everybody. If you're someone who likes to have books that are more like intellectual, you might not like that advice, but for me it always works. So when I'm in a reading slump, I always pick a book that I know is trashy or that I know is bad, but something I can still get through. Yeah. And recommendations. The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, which is a romantasy, and it's Grumpy Egg Sunshine, one of the best romance books I've read. So good. And they can't stand each other, but they start thinks that Imogen's queer when she's straight, so oh my god, what's she supposed to do? I feel like I didn't explain this really well, but it's a really, really sweet story. And it's not very long. Looks worse than it is, the font is kind of big. Then I have, obviously, one of my favorites of last year, Legends and Lattes, if you're more into fantasy. So we had romantasy, we had romance, now we have fantasy. About an orc who opens a cafe. And then we also have Funny Form, if you're looking for non-fiction. Very easy read, partly about growing up in a not so great household, partly about cute animals. By Laurie Zaleski. Yeah, those are my recommendations for you. Next question was a book that's interesting but nothing bad happens, an easy read. Legends and Lattes, nothing bad happens, but it's not without tension, but it's not a lot. And something totally different, The Pentawix by John Birdsall. This is the German edition, but it's originally in English. About 4 sisters, their dog, and their single father on summer holiday. And there's more parts to this, but it's so lovely. Nothing happens. Okay. The next request is from Bookishness ASMR. Also huge shout out to you. I have so many recommendations from you that you said you read. So if you are not subscribed to ASMR Bookishness and you are a reader, what are you doing? Please. I will link the channel down below, so you can follow Erin. Yes, okay. So I am always looking for books with intersex or two-spirit representation. Also books written by non-US authors, especially if it is Asian but not Japanese, or African but not Nigerian. I love Japanese and Nigerian books, they just aren't difficult to find. Two-spirit, I have read Daughters of the Deer by Daniel. It follows a mother and later on her teenage daughter, and the mother is forced to marry a white man, and the daughter is in love with a white girl. Yes. This is a book about loss and about erasure. It's not a very happy book, but it's a very good one, I think. And then non-US authors. So African, I don't know where exactly she is from, but it is said that her book is inspired by African and Arabian culture. Sarah El Arifi and her The Ending Fire trilogy, starting with The Final Strife. This was my favorite book of 2022. And she has an amazing writing style. And this is about 3 girls fighting in an empire that is divided by blood classes. And then I have a lot of Chinese authors actually, but one I would definitely recommend is Shelley Baker-Chan, who is Australian. It says here, Shelley Baker-Chan is Australian by way of Malaysia and New Zealand. And their book is, I would say, Chinese historical fiction with a tad bit of magic. It's awesome. It's amazing. There are also a lot of Chinese and just in general diverse authors in the fantasy section, so it might be worth looking into that. And then also The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Zuri, who's British, but the book is inspired by India and Indian culture. English. I think his book A Man Called Ove or Ove is very well known, but I would definitely recommend all his other books as well. This one, for example, is about a rather difficult woman who, after divorcing her equally difficult husband, finds herself in a very small town with very weird people who are trying to play football now, but it's very good. And he writes people, just his writing of people is amazing. You fall in love with even the most unlikable characters, because he just has this way of words. And then by a Scottish American author, young Mungo, Douglas Stewart. I think he's Scottish American, could be lying. No, he's Scottish and he's living in New York now. This is a story of Mungo who falls in love with a boy, and it's a very traumatic book. Definitely read content warnings before, but it's also a very good book. Next, I had a request for medical-based novels. I do not have any. I only have 2 non-fiction choices for you, and they're both in German, but they were originally in English. One is by Bill Bryson, The Body, A Guide for Occupants. It's thick, and it's about how our body works, explained for people who are not in the medical field. And the other is by Lindsay Fitzharris, and in English it was called The Butchering Heart, Joseph Lister's Quest to Transform the Grisly World of Victorian Medicine. The title pretty much says what it's about. Also very good. And would you know, not washing your hands after touching deceased people and then delivering babies puts the mother at risk? Wow, who would have thought? It's good, it's very good. Then I have another request that unfortunately I could not fulfill. High fantasy series with a huge collection of books similar to the Wheel of Time series. I have never read the Wheel of Time series, and I do not have high fantasy with a huge collection of books. But you also asked for a few non-fiction choices, and I can deliver on that. If you have not seen it, please skip to the last request about medical novels, because those I would definitely recommend for you as well. But then also maybe consider Christiane F. and her descent into drug abuse as a teenager. I think this is a book everybody should read. Then might I also propose Mao's Last Dancer by a Chinese ballet dancer. Very good. Funny Farm by Laura Zaleski, about a troubled childhood and about cute animals. Or something I really enjoyed, Scottish Murders. This is a book that tells 20 more or less true stories about Scottish murders, some of which are unsolved to this very day. It wasn't very expensive, and it's very, very interesting. Can you guess where I bought this? Yes. Okay, I had to take a short break and sort away the books that I don't need anymore. But now we're getting into fantasy, starting with a book for people just getting into fantasy and who feel a little overwhelmed. Bonus points if it's a one-off and not a series. Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson, about a girl who grew up in a library who has to team up with a sorcerer because she is accused of treason and she didn't commit it. Why am I so dark? That's better. also, but it's not that easy to get into. Legends and lattes. This was confusing for me as well, because there are so many different creatures that I didn't know that are like from Dungeons and Dragons, I think. But I think it's a great start into fantasy, and I've heard that a lot of people who don't normally like fantasy really enjoyed this book, so maybe it's worth looking into. It's by Travis Baldry. Then, any good high fantasy with lots of world building, realistic female characters are a huge plus. I have something for you that's perfect. The Priory of the Orange Tree, or in general, books by Samantha Shannon. As you can tell from the size of this book, there's a lot of world building. I really enjoyed it. The characters are great, the world building is great, but it's nothing for beginners with fantasy. And this is about a world divided, a queendom without an heir, and an ancient enemy that awakens. I'm looking for a fantasy in our world, not high fantasy, with really well-built characters. The Watchmaker of Filigree Street by Natasha Pulley. In the Victorian era, about a man who gets gifted a magical watch, and he has to figure out who the watch is from and why the watch was able to save him from an explosion. Then also Wayward. It's not really fantasy. It's fiction with supernatural elements, but maybe you'd like it. It's about 3 different women overcoming hindrances in their paths, aka men. I don't want to be mean, okay? But all 3 of those women are dominated by men in various ways, and it's about how they become free from that. Really good. Something darker. Ninth House by Lee Bardugo, about a college student who can see ghosts and who's also the victim of a horrific unsolved crime, and now she has to work with secret societies at her college. And then there's a dead girl on campus. This was my favorite read of 2023, and there's a second part out. And last but not least, something for children. Lockwood & Co. by Jonathan Stroud. This is a series about young teens who are fighting ghosts. Yes. Regarding the very well-built characters, keep in mind this is for young teens, so don't expect too much, but I liked it a lot. Third-person POV, dark fantasy, romance and spiciness are okay. No bestiality, but vampires are okay. Magic, please. Series, please. Oh boy. I do not read spies, but Ninth House, maybe by Lee Bardugo. Or there's magic, but it's subtle. Or it's not a series and it's not very good. Cruel Illusions by Margie Foston. There's vampires in this one. Both of these I would categorize as dark fantasy, but this one is YA. And then something that's maybe a little different than what you were expecting when you commented that. Song of Silver, Flame Like Night by Amelie Wenshaw. conclusions might be first person. I'm looking for more queer love stories, but it's rare to find that in high fantasy. What are your recommendations? You came to the right place. I have been almost exclusively reading queer fantasy for the last 3 years, and I've only now stopped because I don't think there are more books. Okay, I have to do a speed run. All the books by Sarah Elarifi. This is the first part of a trilogy. It's amazing. It's amazing. And this is a queer normative society. Something I've never seen before in high fantasy. Then The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri, which is Girl X Girl. Then The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. Also Girl X Girl, or rather Women X Women. Oh my god, I have so many. The Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. There's a sapphic relationship, and there's also a relationship between two men. Unfortunately, it's only told in flashbacks because one of the two men is not in the book, not actively. Oh my god, still no end. I didn't write this down for you, but it also fits. She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. And then basically all of the books by Caitlin Bayron, but especially Cinderella's Dead, a Cinderella retelling, and This Poison Heart, about a girl with plant magic. This one has a second part. This is a one-off. I don't have a lot of boy x boy fantasy recommendations, but maybe this will keep you occupied for a little while. Okay. A fantasy novel similar to Six of Crows. Super fast-paced with enjoyable but complex characters. I have not read Six of Crows, so maybe this will be off, but super fast-paced with enjoyable but complex characters definitely fits. Iron Widow, if you're looking for female rage, by, where is the name? Sharon J. Joe. About a girl who wants to avenge her sister and is drawn into a dangerous battle of humans against aliens in a futuristic society, Chinese inspired. And also, I don't know if I would say it's fast paced. The beginning is kind of slow, but it picks up towards the middle, and then I couldn't stop reading, so maybe it's not fast paced, but I read it fast. Song of Silver Flame Like Night by Amelie Wenjo. We have the same last name. Amelie Wenjo and Sharon J. This is about a girl who finds out that she has magic, and a boy, and they're working together to save the country from the conquerors. Also Chinese inspired. Then I would love a suggestion for a book with incredible world building and great characters that will sweep me up and completely immerse me. I need to get lost for a while. World building and characters, definitely The Final Strife. I cannot recommend this enough. I have not read Feybound, which is by the same author. I think it will be similar. Sarah Elarifi just has a really, really captivating writing whose uncle died of AIDS, and how she deals with grief. If you need to get lost, this may be something you're interested in. But also the book's by Samantha Shannon again. Alright. Then fantasy books. Red Queen, please. I've not read Red Queen, but I looked it up and it's with blood classes, I think. If you're looking for something with blood classes, again, the final strife. This has a society that's divided by blood, so you have blue blood, red blood, and clear blood, and the red-blooded people are the rulers. And then Red Queen cast into a world that's not their own, because she's red-blooded, but then gets thrown in with the silver-blooded people, I believe. My recommendation for that... My recommendation for that would be The Unbroken, because the protagonist, Duan gets thrown into a world that she supposedly belongs to, because it's the place where she was born. But she grew up in a different country and has nothing to do with her birthplace at all. And the people there don't want her there as well, because they see her as a traitor for leaving. She was kidnapped, but for leaving. Alright, then. Enemies to lovers. It's not really enemies to lovers, it's more like reluctant allies. But the Jasmine Throne, they're on opposite ends of an empire. One is a princess and one is a citizen of a conquered land. But kind of. Then Sorcery of Thorns, even though the enemy period is kept quite short. And then The Sun and the Void. The enemies to lovers plot is between the protagonist and a secondary character, so it's not really the focus of the book, but I really enjoyed that storyline. And then Victorian with a splash of magic, possibly with a tad of an LGBT romance, but that is not the focus of the story. I have the perfect book for you, trust me. This is the perfect book for you. The Watchmaker of Filigree Street. If you have not read that, what are you doing? When I read your request, I was like, this is the book for you. Victorian, it's 1883. Romance. Queer romance, but not the focus of the story. And a splash of magic. This is literally perfect for you. Maybe also consider Babel by Babel. I never know how to pronounce this in English. In German it's Babel, so Babel. By R.F. Kuang. It's not Victorian. It takes place in 1828, so it's a little bit too early. And there's no LGBT romance. But it has that splash of magic that you were asking for, and I think you might like this. And then also Victorian focus on. The main character acquires a disability throughout the book. It's not the main focus, but it's there. And there's a lot of gender ambiguity, even though it's not explicitly trans, and it's queer. And if you're looking for something with disabled characters, but unfortunately not fantasy, I have Every Time You Go Away by Abigail Johnson.